Romp Romp for playing me in. I'm Staff Sergeant Doug O'Connor of the U.S. Army Band Pershing Zone in Fort Myer, Virginia. I'm originally from Maryland, and I'm here today to give you another video lesson, part 2 in a series on attaining rhythmic mastery. Some of you may have watched part 1, which I made a few weeks ago, called Rhythmic Fragmentation, in which we explored how to master difficult technical challenges by deploying a variety of rhythmic variations on those passages. In today's lesson, we can also go after challenging rhythmic material, but we're attacking your sense of time in addition to passages themselves. So we're going to use a metronome in hopefully some clever, unfamiliar, and unorthodox ways that shake up the way that you practice. So let's get right into it. Let's load an example of music up here. By the way, I'll mention that I am using a piece of free software called OBS, which is sort of like broadcasting and podcasting software. So I'll be trying to do this entire video in one smooth, organic take. So first of all, the passage of music that you see before you is from Jacques Ibert's Concertino da Camera for alto saxophone and chamber orchestra. And I picked it because not only is it familiar to many saxophonists and musicians, but it's got a lot of rhythmic problems and syncopations that are going to be serviced quite well by the metronome techniques we'll use in today's lesson. So let's get right into it. Bring up our metronome here, and I've got it booted up at 80 beats a minute. And chances are, if you use a metronome on a passage like this, it'll probably sound something like what you're about to hear. Okay, good. So the way we typically use a metronome is we have the metronome hitting every downbeat. We speed it up, we slow it down. Perhaps we employ some rhythmic variations like we talked about in the first video. Etc. There's a lot of things that you can do with the metronome. You can turn on the subdivisions. But one of the trickier things that we can do is we can start to rotate the metronome around to different parts of the beat. So let's see what that sounds like. And we'll try some of that, and we'll talk about the benefits of doing so. So here's with the metronome on the E, same tempo, same music. And what I do is I like to start by saying the part of the beat that I want to begin on with the click, and that helps me get going because it can be a little disorienting otherwise. E and a 1, E and a 2, E and a 1, 2. That's the idea. And you get the sense. We can get rid of that, move around to the and slowly begin to master the rhythm of a passage of music and to hear it from all different sides of the beat. And 1, and 2, and 1, 2. Okay, good. And we have one more variation to try there. And that, of course, is my nemesis, the one I find the trickiest, with the metronome on the fourth part of the beat, the A1 E N, A2 E N, A1 E N, A2 E N, A1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, good. So take a moment in the video, pause, take a passage of music. Maybe it's this one, maybe it's a different one. Go try this out, see how it feels. And you're back. So chances are you found some of those variations, those rotations, I call them, a little trickier than others. So the metronome focuses our sense of time. And when we use it to focus our sense of time on parts of the beat that we don't normally pay as much attention to, then that tells us a lot about where we can direct our practice time. So for example, if I'm a little weaker at playing a passage of music with the metronome on the E, that tells me that I don't hear that part of the time quite as well, that I'm not symmetrically in command. And so I can get a lot better, a lot faster by doing that exactly. So let's go on and shake things up a little further. Now we're going to take the time and we're going to overlay a different time signature or tempo, and we're still going to try to get everything line up. So let's use the metronome to beat out the dotted eighth note instead of the quarter note. In order to do that, we're going to divide our bass tempo 80 by 3/4, or 3/4 of a beat, or 0.75, and it's going to give us 107. I'll type that in here. And here's what this looks like in the example. So you can see the dotted eighths are, that's going to represent the metronome click in the bottom stage. So here's what that sounds like. 1, 2, 3. Cool. So whenever we do something like this, we can rotate the beat around as well. And here's how we do that there. We count out the shape of the whole time, and then we give ourselves one extra beat. And that gets us onto the next part of the rotation, or at least it's one easy way of doing that. So let's try that. Here's the second rotation of dotted eighths on this passage. 1, 2, 3, 1. Great. Turn off the metronome there. And great. Let's boot up the last variation of these. Hold on one second. Technical difficulties. There we go. Take that one away. And third variation. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Great. So we can take this concept and we can apply it in the other direction as well. So rather than taking 3/16 notes, let's try 5. So here's what that is going to look like. Let's take that away. And we set the metronome to every 5/16. Now let's remind ourselves of what our original tempo feels like. This is 80. We're not going to deviate from this for this passage for this entire video to keep things a little clearer and easier for me to do in one take. Okay, great. We'll divide by 5/4, which will give us 64 as a tempo. And our pattern here is in 5. So 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 5 E and a 1. So it'll take us 5 of our regular music beats from the passage in order to line up with the time again. Let me make this go away. Okay, so let's hear what that sounds like. 1, 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 5 E and... Forgot to breathe before I started playing, right from counting into playing. I don't recommend it. So what I'll do is, since you got the idea of the rotations from the last one, I'll do one rotation of this and then leave you to figure out the other 3 on a passage and to explore that. So let's make this go away. Just a second. There we go. Bring up the second rotation in 5s. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 5 E and a 1. Cool. So what we did there is a bunch of variations that either move the metronome beat around or superimpose a different kind of time on it so that your anchor points change. But everything that we just did relied on using the same subdivision, which is great news. Now, one of the things that, if you take a moment and try these 2 last variations out, using the dotted eighth and then every 5/16, you may have found that the fewer clicks you get, the harder it is, the more the challenge goes up. And the reason for this is that your imagination has to get more active. You have to start filling in the time in your mind, in your heart, if you will, with where those subdivisions are, and you get fewer checkpoints to make sure that you're right with the music. And so your confidence has to be higher too. So let's take that as an idea and exploit it and go after another end of using the metronome. And so the title of this video is called Creating Time, How to Really Use a Metronome. And that's where the creating time aspect comes in. And I got this idea of mine from a former student who brought a book to my attention that did this kind of stuff. His name is Tyler Anderson. He's on his way to North Carolina to start producing podcasts with Branford Marsalis, which is great. He's a fantastic saxophonist. And thank you, Tyler, for making me aware of these techniques. So what we're going to do to learn creating time a little bit better is we're going to take away more metronome clicks. Let's go back to 80 for a second. That's not 80. There we go. Okay, now we're going to only use the metronome, say, every bar. So let's divide that in half and give ourselves 40 beats a minute. That's not 40. There we go. I gotta click enter. You get the idea. And of course, you can deploy this in as long a time as you want. So we can take it all the way down to, say, 10 beats a minute, which would be every 8 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Ah, I was early, right? So you can see the challenge here, and you can really start to develop your sense of time using techniques just like that. I have one final example to sort of put you through time boot camp today with a metronome. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about how all of these variations and exercises use the same subdivision as the music. And there's something convenient about that, and even as tricky as that is, we can throw that out the window too. So let's pick a metronome beat that has a less congruent subdivision to the music that we're playing. So the music we're playing in this case is filled with mostly 16th notes and duple pattern rhythmic objects. So groups of 4, groups of 2, but 16th notes largely. So if we take the metronome and we put it on, say, a triplet quarter note, the subdivisions are totally different there. And what that means is that most of the metronome clicks we have to ignore, we have to be rhythmically dissonant against, and then every now and then on the special ones, we have to lock right in. So to demonstrate that, let's pull up an example here. This is the most fun of them, in my opinion, the most stimulating. Let's go over to my metronome, and I'm going to add a couple of extra beats. I'm going to make them a little bit quieter, and that'll give us a 3 pattern. Let's put in 120. Again, this is the triplet quarter note, so it's 2/3 of a beat. So I divide my original bass tempo 80 by 2/3, I get 120. All right, so, oh wait, I need to add more beats to the bar. Here we go. One, two, 1, 2. Cool. So it's really important there to achieve that sense of rhythmic dissonance. The 16th notes should definitely not line up, and they should feel like they're really that they have a sort of rhythmic friction against the metronome. And then on the red notes, I guess they're red, I've colored them red here, they should line up very tightly. You can rotate this the same as the other ones that we did, so we can try that really simply by putting the click, the downbeat on the alignment point, I should say, on beat 2 of the bar instead of beat 1. Let's try that. 1, 2, 1, 2. Great. So exercises like all of the ones that we've explored here today will hone and develop your sense of time. And what I hope they'll do when you do them in a practice room and you do them on a regular basis is they'll give you the ability to play against complex Afro-Cuban beats, or with players that maybe don't have as good a sense of time without dragging you off. Or they'll give you the ability to roll right through 5/8 and 7/8 and mix meter transitions while keeping a steady beat. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So when you can keep multiple layers of time going on in your head because you've practiced things like this, you become unshakable. Rhythmically, you become the kind of player that other musicians in an ensemble follow, and it's really, really fun to boot. Now, some of you might be thinking, hey, I have a hard enough time playing the music I'm trying to play, just putting the metronome right on the notes they're supposed to be on. Who has time for all these circus tricks with a metronome, right? And so I have two things to say to you on that. So one is that sometimes when you make things a little bit harder than they need to be, it sort of pushes you through the point of diminishing returns. It gives you a little bit of extra bump, and that is often the faster way to get through a problem, a stagnation point in your development. And two, many of these rhythms, they're just going to develop so many things in your playing overall, right? So some of those I just covered. I'm reviewing my notes here. Oh yes, now I remember what I was going to say. These techniques, they're not hard. They're just unfamiliar, right? So you have to deploy them attainably. So the music didn't change. I played the same music in all of these cases, and yet it was much trickier for my brain to wrap itself around perceiving the music from certain anchor points. So little by little, those become more and more familiar, and they become easier. And then over time, I or you or someone who deploys these things on a daily and regular basis will attain what I call symmetrical rhythmic commands, where it doesn't matter where you hear or feel the time. You can play accurately wherever the time is because you're hearing all of it simultaneously. So it is my hope that all of you develop that symmetric rhythmic command. And with that in mind, I'm going to say that this is a good place to stop the video. Invite your further comments. Please comment, please like and share this video and talk to us. Share what other ideas you may have had or other ideas that you want to see explored from a series like this. I would encourage you to check out my fellow compatriots, not only in the United States Army Band Pershing Zone, but in all of the military service bands throughout the world, especially during the pandemic. This is a great way and a great time to hone your skills. And of course, to check out their performances as well. I look forward to hearing from you and to seeing you online in the virtual audience for these videos and others to come. Thank you for tuning in. And here is some more Swamp Romp to play us out. Thank you, Swamp Romp.